What's going on, guys? This is Mike from True Business Review, and today I get to finally do one of the videos I've been most excited for all season long. Today I am predicting the Detroit Lions record for the 2020 season. I'm going to go game by game and predict their win and loss, and we'll see what their overall record turns out to be. I think people are going to be surprised. Now, before we get into that, I just want to say keep up the support on the channel. Make sure you're all subscribing. And how did we get to the Detroit Lions? So far, we predicted every single team in the NFC East record. So Cowboys, Giants, Eagles, Redskins. And then we predicted the Chicago Bears to kick off the NFC North. So we're on the Detroit Lions. And before we look at their schedule, let's talk about the things that I think that they did in the offseason or the draft that are going to make this team stacked or hurt this team. So the Lions actually made a lot of moves that I liked a ton. So the only thing I don't like with the Detroit Lions is they traded Darius Slay literally for nothing. They traded Darius Slay for a 3rd and 5th round pick. And in the 3rd round, they selected offensive guard from Ohio State, Jonah Jackson. And in the 5th round, they selected Quintez Cephas from Wisconsin. So, I mean, what are the odds that either of those players are going to be stars? And we already know that Darius Slay established himself as one of the best corners in the league. So, that's a pretty solid loss for this team. However, I guess that they felt solid with getting rid of Slay because maybe they thought Jeff Okudah would come in and be his replacement. They obviously drafted Jeff Okudah 3rd overall in the draft. And I think that was the right selection for this team, especially because they got rid of Slay. And they also signed Desmond Trufant. He was the Falcons cornerback to a 2-year, $21 million deal. He actually played pretty well. He got 4 interceptions in 9 games last year. So if he was fully healthy all season, he could have been one of the best players. So they have Trufant and Okudah to replace Slay. They signed Eagles offensive tackle Halapoulides Vaitai to a 5-year, $40 million deal. They got Geronimo Allison, and they only pay him $900K a year, which I think that's crazy. I know he's not great, but it's a pretty low salary for the NFL. Re-signed Amendola, who's one of the most consistent wide receivers for that team. And they drafted DeAndre Swift, 35th overall. He had 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 200 receiving yards in college. I actually like the DeAndre Swift selection, 35th overall. So they got to basically choose their running back. The only team that chose before them was the Chiefs. So they got to select DeAndre Swift exclusively. And he's going to join their running back room with Kerryon Johnson. And obviously Kerryon Johnson suffered injuries in 2019. So DeAndre Swift and him are both going to compete for the starting job. And if one of them gets injured, the other one should still be doing fine. They have a decent offensive line to go along with that running back room, but they have a good offense. Quarterback is Matthew Stafford, who I think is underrated because injuries and maybe not the best coaching. Their wide receivers are Kenny Golladay, one of those underrated receivers in the league, 1,200 receiving yards on 65 receptions, 11 touchdowns. If you look at the stats for every wide receiver, those stats are elite. I'm talking like top 10. That's better than Amari Cooper did. Other receivers are Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola, and they have a decent defense with Jamie Collins, Desmond Trufant, Okudah, and Trey Flowers headlining the big names on defense. So the only sketchy thing about this team is Matt Patricia is their coach. Obviously, Matt Patricia thinks he's Bill Belichick, and maybe that might be the reason that Darius Slay left. Maybe their personalities didn't click because, for Bill Belichick, at least people know he's great. Maybe Matt Patricia came in with the Bill Belichick mindset, but with no evidence of his talents in the coaching position. So with Matt Patricia as coach, it's going to be interesting to see how this Detroit Lions team performs. But with that being said, let's look at their schedule. So week 1, the Detroit Lions play the Chicago Bears in Detroit, and I think that the Detroit Lions will coast through this game. Mitchell Trubisky is probably going to be in for the Bears, and I think that it's going to be a pretty easy game for the Detroit Lions. Matthew Stafford's probably going to throw for over 300 yards. Kenny Golladay is going to have a 100 receiving yard game, and the Detroit Lions take it home week 1, and they're 1-0. Next up for the Detroit Lions, they have a really tough 3-game stretch. They have to travel to Green Bay to play the division rival of the Packers. Then they travel to Arizona to play the Cardinals, and then they play the New Orleans Saints in Detroit. So Lions at Packers. So it's too early in the season for the Detroit Lions to mesh together, especially with Matthew Stafford coming off that injury. I believe that Aaron Rodgers, his veteranship and the chemistry he's already established with all of his teammates is going to provide them the win, especially because it's in Green Bay. I believe the Packers beat the Lions. Lions are 1-1. Next up, Lions go to Arizona to play the Arizona Cardinals, and I think this is going to be one of the best games of the year because I believe both these teams have similar offenses. So the Cardinals have Kyler Murray, which obviously is nothing compared to Matthew Stafford, but they're both exciting to watch. Matthew Stafford is a huge cannon for an arm, and Kyler Murray obviously has the speed. The Cardinals have a fun offense, though. It just seems like it would be a fun place to be. They obviously drafted some offensive line help. They got DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk, Kenyon Drake. They are a really solid offense just in general. They have Charles Clay. On defense, they got Chandler Jones and Patrick Peterson. So Cardinals definitely have a better offense and defense, but I believe that this game is going to be a shootout in Arizona in the desert, and the Detroit Lions fall short for the second week straight and take the loss. The Lions start out 1-2. Next up, Detroit Lions play the New Orleans Saints in Detroit, so it's a home game for the Lions, and unfortunately, I don't see the Lions, topping the Saints, even though it's in Detroit. I think the Saints are going to have one of the best records in the NFL in 2020. Obviously, Drew Brees, his integrity is kind of in question by that whole locker room, but it seems like they're kind of coming around and accepting his apology. I don't really know. It's kind of a weird situation. But obviously, Michael Thomas is one of the most targeted receivers in the game. He doesn't miss many passes on all those high-volume targets. Taysom Hill's an interesting wild card player for that team, and they have a solid defense to go along with their stacked offense with Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, and Drew Brees. So the Saints take this win in Detroit. Lions start off 1-3. So it's time for the Lions to hit the panic button. They started off 1-3, and they definitely don't want to replicate what they did last year with their not-so-great record. Next off, they play what I think is going to be the worst team in the league. They have to travel to Jacksonville to play the Jacksonville Jaguars. So obviously, I don't like this team at all. I think that they got rid of too many defensive pieces, and I don't think that Gardner Minshew is the guy. If I was the Jaguars, I don't know who makes the decisions, I guess executive or something like that. Maybe you guys can comment it down below. I would fire every single person below me who was responsible for getting rid of Nick Foles. So I'm guessing maybe Doug Marrone, and I guess the general manager, honestly. I don't know if anyone's above him, though. But maybe the owner. I guess the owner would have to talk to the general manager. Whoever got rid of Nick Foles for only a fourth-round pick, that hurts my brain. Former Super Bowl MVP, who honestly played really well until he broke his collarbone. Nick Foles contended with the Chiefs. It was a close game. He made Chris Conley and D.D. Westbrook look like really solid players, so I don't know who got rid of Nick Foles in favor of Gardner Minshew. Obviously, Minshew mania, okay, but get over it. He's not going to win you games. Jaguars are going to be a horrible team. Detroit Lions pick things back up after 3 straight losses, get the win in Jacksonville. Lions 2-3. Next up, Lions play the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta. This is an interesting game. We got 2 Matts. We got Matt Ryan and Matthew Stafford facing off in Atlanta. The Falcons, honestly, I don't think they've done enough this offseason to be a contender. They lost a lot of pieces. So they lost Devontae Freeman, Desmond Trufant, Vic Beasley, Austin Hooper. I guess you can say they lost Todd Gurley because that deal fell through. And really their only addition was Hayden Hurst to replace Austin Hooper, which I don't even like that. So I really don't like the stuff that the Falcons did in this offseason. I think they're going to be – obviously they had actually a really solid stretch at the end of the year to save their coach's job. But this far, I think it's 6 weeks into the season, I don't see the Falcons beating the Lions, regardless of where this game is played. Matt Ryan, Kenny Galladay, the stacked Lions offense is going to dominate the Falcons in Atlanta. Lions 3-3, and they're finally regaining hope after a dominant performance in Atlanta. So that means that the Lions have to play the Indianapolis Colts. Luckily for the Lions, this game is in Detroit. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. We got Trey Flowers facing up against one of the strongest offensive lines in the league. I think Phillip Rivers, I think he is getting washed up, but I don't think he's washed up yet. Especially going from the terrible Chargers offensive line to the stacked offensive line that the Indianapolis Colts will provide him. Marlon Mack's a really good running back, and obviously they drafted their guy in the draft that they wanted. I think the Colts defense is the thing in question. I think they have, I don't know. I forget who they have on defense, but I think they have somebody. I'm not thinking of his name, but I know on offense they have Quentin Nelson. I don't know, but Colts have a really good team overall. I think that they're going to be in contention for maybe 6 or 7 seed in the playoffs. But, like I said, Detroit Lions offense, they're firing on all cylinders, coming off a big-time win in Atlanta. Lions pull it off in Detroit. Lions are 4-3. Things are looking solid. Next up, Lions play another division rival for the Minnesota Vikings, but this time it's in Minnesota. They already lost to the Packers in Green Bay, and I think they're going to replicate that to the Vikings in Minnesota. Divisional games are tough, always, and home field advantage in a divisional game, you know that the other team's fans are going to show up. It's going to be a tough environment to play in, and I don't see Matthew Stafford, beating one of the teams that always has a playoff dynamic. See, the Lions, their problem is they might not have the same mentality as other teams because they might not know that they're as good as they can be, whereas the Vikings know that they have a really stacked roster. I believe the Lions fall short, and now they are 4-4. 4-4. Other teams in their division might be higher at this point, so the Lions really have to pick things up, and this is the stretch to do it. They're 4-4, and then they play the Redskins, Panthers, Texans, and Bears. So the Lions play the Redskins in Detroit, and the only factor for the Redskins in this game is Terry McLaurin and Chase Young. Those are their only hope. They have to hope that Terry McLaurin has 2 60-yard touchdowns in this game, or that Chase Young just dominates the Lions' offensive line, which I don't think is going to happen personally. I think Lions win big in Detroit against the Redskins. I don't think it'll be that much of a threat. Lions 5-4. Next up, Lions play the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. Like I said, this is the same reasoning as the Jacksonville Jaguars game. I think the Panthers are going to be a horrible team this year. They got their new quarterback is Teddy Bridgewater. They got Christian McCaffrey. I think they do have good receivers, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, and they got a solid offense just in general, I think. But I don't see the Panthers' defense being a threat at all without Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly was the captain of that defense, debatably captain of that team with McCaffrey, and I say that they're going to be a horrible team this year. Lions destroy the Panthers, and they have a 2-game win streak going, 6-4. Next up, Lions play the Texans in Detroit. 2 gunslingers, Matthew Stafford and Deshaun Watson. I believe Matthew Stafford comes out on top. It's a home game. Deshaun Watson, I don't think he's going to be as good this year without his number 1 guy, DeAndre Hopkins. I understand that Kenny Stills and Will Fuller are decent receivers, but imagine losing your right arm, GG. Watson lost his left hand, man. I think it's going to be a huge impact this season for their whole team in general. I think the Lions win this game with ease. They're 7-4 now. Things are looking solid. Next up, they play the Chicago Bears in Chicago. Obviously, they beat them earlier in the season in Detroit. Now, the Lions are going to have a better team than the Bears at this point. But what's different this time than last time? Home field advantage for the Bears is not going to be enough for me to give them a win. But you know what is going to be enough? The first time this team played was Week 1, and Mitchell Trubisky was starting. This game comes later in the season, and guess what? Nick Foles is in to start. Nick Foles is going to start this game, and I think he is going to come out on top and beat the Detroit Lions in his home stadium. Nick Foles just has that extra oomph factor. I think him and Allen Robinson are going to have a really good chemistry for Chicago, and I believe the Lions lose this game, which is going to be a tough loss for them. Lions are 7-5. So 7-5 is a pretty solid record, but they got to win a couple more games to definitely make the playoffs, and they have a tough closing stretch. They play the Packers, Titans, Buccaneers, and Vikings. So some of you are going to disagree with this, but whatever. So they already lost to the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. And I believe in Detroit, Matthew Stafford and this really stacked offense come out on top, and they beat the Packers in Detroit. Lions 8-5. Next up, they play the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. As solid as Derrick Henry is and the Titans' offense, I don't see Ryan Tannehill out-dueling Matthew Stafford. I just think that maybe the pieces around the quarterback in Tennessee are better, but the actual quarterback is better in Detroit. And who knows, maybe DeAndre Swift is going to be having a great year at this point, and him and Derrick Henry can have a game right here. I believe the Lions beat the Titans in Tennessee. Lions are 1, 2, 4, 7, 9-5, it looks like. Next up, they play the Buccaneers. Luckily for the Lions, this game is in Detroit. If it was in Tampa Bay, things might be different, but I think that both of these teams have similar offenses. Lions definitely have better running backs. That's the only debate. I think that Matthew Stafford and Tom Brady is going to be a fun game to watch. Matthew Stafford outduels the Buccaneers in Detroit. The Lions definitely have a better defense than the Buccaneers. Buccaneers don't really have that many great pieces. I think they have decent linebackers, but I believe the Lions will beat this game because of their defense. And the Lions are 10-5, and they're clutching up. So 10-5. Who is their closing game against? Divisional rival of the Minnesota Vikings. And who knows what their record is, but I do. But you don't. So this could be a game where whichever team wins this game wins the division. Luckily for the Detroit Lions, this game is in Detroit, and they lost earlier in the season. They're going to be angry, out for revenge. And when you're a team that doesn't make the playoffs that much and you get this opportunity, you shouldn't let it fall short. The Lions are going to get so excited that they have a chance to win the division, and they're going to come out guns blazing, beat the Minnesota Vikings in Detroit to close out their schedule, and that's going to be a record of 11-5 for the Detroit Lions. I know a lot of people might not agree with this record, but I think that with all the pieces that they added this offseason that I explained earlier in this video, this Detroit Lions offense is going to be top 10 in the league, top 8 probably, and I think their defense is going to be like top 16 in points allowed, so top 20 maybe. But with that being said, Lions finish 11-5. Next up, we're doing the Packers and Vikings. Who knows if one of them is going to take home the division. Make sure you guys check out the playlist for the of their teams we already predicted. So there's a Mike's schedule predictions playlist, and there's also a playoff prediction playlist where you'll see if 11-5 was good enough to get the Lions into the playoffs. So make sure you guys subscribe on this video, and drop a like down below. Comment if you agree or disagree, and why not, what games you disagree with or what games you agree with. And thanks for watching.